I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you are trying to build a weapon.
Okay.
You're out there. You're highly focused, gathering materials, basically trying to engineer something that will help you hunt and just survive in this incredibly harsh environment.
Right. The stakes are literally life or death.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the middle of this intense, completely unrelated engineering project, you accidentally invent a life-saving medicine.
Wow.
Yeah, like you aren't looking for a cure for anything. It happens as a total byproduct of your work.
That is wild.
It is. And today, we are taking a deep dive into a stack of research that suggests Neanderthals did exactly that. They did it with birch tar.
Oh, birch tar. That's a huge topic right now.
Right. We've got this fascinating peer-reviewed study from the journal PLOS One that was led by archaeologist Tjaark Siemssen. And we're looking at some great reporting from Ars Technica and FIS.org, too.
Yeah, the Siemssen study is really breaking new ground.
It really is. So our mission today is to completely rethink Neanderthal intelligence and healthcare.
Yeah.
We're going to explore how a prehistoric superglue functioned as the world's first antiseptic and, what ancient paleopharmacology could actually teach us about modern medical crises.
I love that because we're looking at a scenario where a purely technological tool, something just designed to bind stone to wood, crosses over into the realm of biology and healing.
Yeah.
And the implications for how we view our distant cousins, they're profound. For a long time, the archaeological record has been so heavily biased towards stone tools.
Just because stone survives, right? While organic matter decays.
Exactly. The organic stuff rots away. But this new research allows us to finally see the perishable, deeply innovative parts of their daily lives.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we get into petri dishes and modern microbiology, we need to put ourselves in the bare feet of a Neanderthal who is actually making this stuff.
No, absolutely. It's a process.
The sources point out that Neanderthals had been distilling this tar from birch bark for at least 200,000 years.
Which is just a staggering amount of time.
Right. And by 50,000 years ago, it was this routine, complex industrial process. They needed it as an adhesive, prehistoric superglue, basically to have their stone points onto wooden spears.
Right, so the weapons wouldn't just shatter on impact when they hit an animal.
Exactly. But making this tar, it is not as simple as just tapping a maple tree for syrup.
Far from it. They were utilizing a process called destructive distillation.
Which sounds like a very modern chemical engineering term.
It does, but the underlying physics are exactly what Neanderthals mastered. To do this, you have to heat the birch bark to a very specific temperature, but, and this is the hard part, you must do it in a low oxygen environment.
Because if you just throw it on a fire.
Right. If you just throw birch bark on a campfire, the oxygen feeds the flames, the bark burns up, and you get nothing but ash.
Yeah. Totally useless.
But if you starve the environment of oxygen while applying intense heat, the chemical structure of the bark breaks down. It essentially sweats out this thick, dark, chemical-rich resin.
But wait, if you're out in the Pleistocene wilderness, without glassware or modern kilns, how do you actually build an oxygen-starved environment?
Well, the researchers in the PLOS One study, they actually recreated the exact extraction methods that would have been used at Neanderthal sites in Europe.
Oh, that's so cool. What did they do?
They focused on two techniques. The first is a condensation method. You take the birch bark and you literally burn it directly beneath a flat, smooth rock.
Okay.
So as the bark smolders, the vaporized resin hits the cooler surface of the stone, condenses into a sticky tar, and then you just scrape it off.
That sounds fairly straightforward, if maybe a bit tedious. What was the second method?
The second one is way more complex. It's the raised clay pit structure.
Okay, how does that work?
You dig a hole, you place a small collection vessel at the bottom, and then you build a chamber above it, packed with birch bark. Then you seal the whole thing with wet clay.
Wow.
Yeah, leaving only a tiny vent, and you build a fire over the top. The clay bakes hard, sealing out the oxygen. The ambient heat from the fire bakes the bark inside, and the tar slowly sweats out and drips down into the vessel.
That sounds incredibly labor-intensive.
It is.
And according to the researchers who actually tried doing this, it's also a profoundly messy, intense sensory experience.
Oh, yeah. They spent hours sitting by these smoky fires.
And they noted that getting this low-viscosity tar off their hands afterward was a massive challenge. Think about the last time you used heavy-duty industrial superglue.
Or like that expanding polyurethane foam for a DIY project.
Yes. Exactly. No matter how careful you are, you inevitably end up with it all over your hands.
Oh, absolutely. Every time.
Now imagine doing that without running water, without chemical solvents, and without soap.
What's fascinating here is that the messiness is actually the key to the entire hypothesis.
Really? How so?
Because the tar gets absolutely everywhere during production. Skin contamination for these Neanderthals was totally inevitable. Furthermore, it takes a shockingly small amount of this stuff to cover a large area.
Oh, right. The study noted that just 0.2 grams of birch tar can cover 100 square centimeters of skin.
Exactly. So if you are manufacturing this adhesive, your hands, your arms, maybe your legs, they're going to be coated in this sticky, resinous gunk.
And you're living in this harsh environment where you're constantly accumulating cuts, scrapes, burns, insect bites.
You're covered in them.
Right. So if you have a horrible scrape that's getting red and inflamed, and you inevitably smear this birch tar into it while you're just trying to make spears, you are going to observe what happens next.
Exactly. If that wound stops hurting and heals perfectly instead of festering, a highly observant person is going to remember that.
Yeah, they would immediately integrate that knowledge into their survival toolkit.
Yes. Right. It's the accidental discovery of first aid.
But I mean, an accidental smear on a cut is just an anecdote.
True.
To prove this tree sap actually functioned as a prehistoric medicine, Siemssen's team had to put it to the test. They transitioned from archaeological theory to modern microbiology.
Yeah, they took it straight to the lab.
So they extracted tar from two species of Birch Betula pendula, which is the silver birch, and Betula pubescens.
Using those exact Pleistocene methods we just talked about?
Right, totally authentic. And then they tested this prehistoric-style tar against two very specific types of modern bacteria.
Which ones did they use?
One was Staphylococcus aureus, which, causes major skin infections and wound festering.
Nasty stuff.
Very. And the other was Escherichia coli, or E. coli, which is primarily a gut bacteria that causes food poisoning.
Okay, so they used a method called a disc diffusion assay for this.
How does that work?
You take a petri dish that is actively growing a smooth, even layer of bacteria, and you place a small paper disc soaked in the birch tar right in the center.
Okay, makes sense.
Then you wait and you measure. If the substance is antibacterial, it will kill the bacteria around it, creating a clear ring, they call it a zone of inhibition, where nothing can grow.
Then what were the results?
They were highly specific. Against E. coli, the birch tar had absolutely zero effect. The bacteria grew right up to the edge of the disc.
Wow, nothing at all.
Nothing. But against Staphylococcus aureus, the tar actively inhibited the bacterial growth. Their most effective sample, it was labeled BT5, made from silver birch using that clay pit method. It created a clear zone of inhibition measuring 10.5 millimeters.
Wait, why would it kill one type of bacteria but be completely useless against the other? Doesn't that mean it's just a weak antibiotic?
Not necessarily. It actually comes down to the structural armor of the bacteria itself, not a weakness in the tar.
Armor, like literally.
Well, chemically speaking, yes. In microbiology, bacteria are broadly categorized into two groups based on their cell walls, gram-negative and gram-positive. Think of E. coli, which is gram-negative, like a knight wearing full-plate armor. It has extra outer membrane, which is a very tough, impenetrable lipid layer.
So the tar just bounces right off.
Exactly. The chemical compounds in the birch tar just bounce right off that armor. But Staphylococcus aureus is gram-positive.
Meaning it doesn't have the armor.
Right. It's more like a soldier just wearing a cloth tunic. It lacks that heavy outer membrane, making it incredibly vulnerable to the specific chemical weapons hidden inside the tar.
It's so interesting. So the tar happens to be perfectly suited for the exact type of vulnerable bacteria that opportunistically infects an open skin wound.
Exactly.
But what exactly are those chemical weapons punching through the tunic? Like, what's in the tar?
The tar is packed with these ring-shaped molecules called phenolic derivatives.
Phenols.
Right. Phenols are aggressive chemical compounds that are incredibly effective at binding to and disrupting the cell walls of gram-positive bacteria, causing them to basically break down and die. And to ground this in our modern reality, the medical field still relies heavily on phenols today.
Really? Like in what?
Well, if you've ever used an antiseptic mouthwash, or washed with that pink pre-surgery skin cleanser they use in hospitals' Hibiclens, you are utilizing phenolic derivatives.
No way. So the Neanderthals were utilizing the exact same chemical mechanism, just in a raw, unrefined state straight from the tree.
Precisely.
And the sources also point out that the tar contains chemical compounds called terpenes.
Oh, yes. Terpenes are fascinating.
Right, because plants naturally produce terpenes as a defense mechanism to fend off insects.
Yep.
So this sticky byproduct isn't just an antiseptic for cuts. It is simultaneously a prehistoric bug spray.
Which is a crucial detail when you consider where they were living. The environmental context really matters here.
Yeah.
The sources pointed that many Neanderthal groups lived in environments like heavily forested, midge-infested wetlands.
Oh man, if you have ever been swarmed by biting midges or mosquitoes in a swamp, you know the physical and mental toll it takes.
They can drive you completely insane.
Exactly. Having a birch tar paste that repels the insects carrying disease while simultaneously disinfecting the bites you already have, that goes far beyond a simple luxury.
Oh, absolutely. It would be a fundamental requirement for survival.
So what does this all mean? We're moving from the sterile lab back into the human experience here.
Right.
Because the idea of birch tar functioning as a medicine isn't just a theory derived from a Petri dish.
Right.
It's a living, continuous reality for many cultures today.
Yeah. The PLOS One study explicitly highlights that indigenous communities have understood and utilized the healing properties of birch tar for thousands of years.
Yes, the sources specifically detail the practices of the Mi'kmaq people of eastern Canada.
Right. They use a slightly more fluid version, don't they?
Yeah, an oily version of birch bark extract that they call masquiomi. And they've used it for generations to treat skin infections, severe rashes, and open wounds.
It's incredible.
And this practice spans the globe. The Sami people in northern Scandinavia and the Yakut people in Siberia, they also utilize birch tar medicinally.
Wow.
So Western science is not discovering that birch tar is medicine. Western science is simply using disk diffusion assays to explain the underlying chemical mechanics, like the phenols actively destroying the cell walls of S. aureus.
Exactly.
They're just explaining a practice that traditional indigenous knowledge has successfully applied for millennia.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this highlights a deep, symbiotic, co-evolutionary relationship between technology and medicine.
How so?
Well, it demonstrates that the ancestors of modern indigenous peoples, and ancient humans in general, were deeply observant, self-taught material scientists.
Right, they were paying attention.
Exactly. They were constantly experimenting with their environment, tracking outcomes over time, and passing that vital knowledge down through generations. The fact that the Mi'kmaq masquiomi and the Neanderthal birch tar rely on the exact same fundamental chemistry to achieve the same medical outcome, that is a testament to the universal human capacity for scientific observation.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If Neanderthals were observant enough to look at the sticky mess left over from making their spears and recognize its medical utility, we have to reevaluate their entire culture.
Oh, totally.
We are so used to that tired stereotype of the brutish, grunting caveman whose only solution to a problem was hitting it with a rock.
Right, the classic cartoon caveman.
Exactly. But this paints a picture of a community with the capacity for complex, nuanced care.
The Ars Technica piece actually refers to this as the softer side of the Stone Age.
I like that phrasing.
Yeah, as archaeological techniques become more refined, we are finally able to detect the fragile, perishable aspects of their lives. We now have concrete evidence that Neanderthals were manufacturing spun plant fiber yarn and crafting delicate wooden foraging tools.
Which completely changes the narrative.
It does. But perhaps the most compelling evidence for this softer side comes from the realm of early herbal medicine and physical care.
Okay, yes. The researchers analyzed dental calculus from Neanderthal remains.
Calculus, yeah.
And for anyone unfamiliar, dental calculus is essentially the hardened plaque that builds up on teeth.
Right. If you don't brush and floss, plaque calcifies into tartar.
Exactly. And over tens of thousands of years, that calculus acts like a microscopic time capsule. It traps tiny food particles, plant matter, and DNA from whatever that individual was putting in their mouth.
It's amazing what they can find in there.
It is. So archaeologists scraped the calculus off the teeth of a Neanderthal found at the El Sidran cave in Spain and another from Shanidar cave in Iraq.
And what did they find?
Trapped inside that ancient plaque were the chemical traces of chamomile and yarrow.
Ah. Now, the presence of chamomile and yarrow is highly significant.
Why is that?
Because neither of those plants possesses any real caloric or nutritional value.
Right, you wouldn't eat them for a meal.
Exactly. A starving hunter-gatherer does not eat them for energy. However, both plants contain well-documented anti-inflammatory compounds.
Okay.
They are naturally occurring medicines that can soothe gastrointestinal distress or just reduce systemic pain. The intentional repeated ingestion of these specific plants strongly suggests that Neanderthals possessed a working knowledge of herbal pharmacology.
And it wasn't just herbal remedies either. It was sustained physical care.
Yes.
The sources bring up a specific individual excavated at that same Shanidar cave in Iraq. This Neanderthal had suffered and survived a severed tibia-like, a massive catastrophic lower leg injury.
Which is just mind-blowing.
It is. You do not survive a severed leg in the Pleistocene on your own.
No way.
You cannot hunt, you cannot gather food, you cannot run from predators, and you cannot defend yourself.
Right.
That bone will not knit back together unless someone brings you water, provides you with calories, protects you from the elements, and tends to your wounds over a period of months.
This raises an important question about how we view the history of medicine itself. Deep-time healthcare was not rudimentary. It was highly complex and socially integrated.
Yeah, they were a real community.
Exactly. Early humans maximized the affordances of their natural world. Whether a community was pooling its resources to feed an injured companion for months, or an individual was applying mineral-rich red ochre to their skin to prevent sunburn.
Or they were utilizing phenolic birch tar to prevent a minor scrape from turning into a fatal blood infection.
Right. They squeezed every drop of utility out of their environment.
So why does this ancient history matter to you listening to this right now? Why should you care about the sticky tree sap a Neanderthal was using 50,000 years ago?
That's a fair question.
Well, because right now, modern medicine is facing a terrifying crisis.
Yeah.
Antimicrobial resistance.
Yes, this is a huge issue.
The bacteria are evolving rapidly, learning to beat our modern, highly refined antibiotics. We are running out of weapons.
It's scary.
It really is. And researchers believe that by looking backward at paleopharmacology, the medicinal practices of the deep past, we might rediscover antibiotic compounds and chemical combinations that the modern medical establishment has completely forgotten about.
It's so true.
Traditional indigenous knowledge, verified by archaeological evidence, might literally hold the key to developing the next generation of life-saving drugs.
Now, it is worth adding a very important disclaimer that the researchers and the journalists were quick to point out.
Yes, please. If you have a severe skin infection today, go to a modern doctor.
Yes, absolutely.
They have highly refined, targeted antibiotics. Do not go into your backyard, set birch bark on fire under a rock, and attempt to formulate your own Pleistocene ointment.
Yeah, please leave the raw tar extraction to the archaeologists and the ancestors.
Exactly. Don't try this at home.
But this research does leave us with a profound final thought to mull over.
What's that?
We have just explored how a frustrating, messy, sticky byproduct generated by the mundane task of manufacturing prehistoric weapons turned out to be a crucial life-saving medicine.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what everyday accidents, annoying byproducts, or messy industrial processes in our modern lives right now might actually be the scientific breakthroughs of tomorrow?
Wow.
What miracles are currently hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone observant enough to notice them?
That is such a great point.
Yeah.
The next time you are frustrated because you got glue all over your hands while trying to fix something around the house, remember that you might just be following in the exact footsteps of the world's very first doctors. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious.